Hello.
I am Paul Gannon. I'll be hosting the Q&A for this. You may have just heard me sing. I apologise.
That was Paul with the Sigourney Weaver poem at the end.
Yeah, sorry.
No. It's my favourite song in the
I know,
the
but
whole
I
track.
can't
Brilliant.
hear myself sing. It's like someone's piercing me with daggers. So I'm just here to moderate this Q&A. I've known these two, Anthony and Claire Bueno. Give them a round of applause for this documentary. I've known these guys for as long as they've been making this documentary, so I've known them about 30 years now, I think it is.
At least.
It feels like that.
So
yeah.
Named our kids after you, and their
no.
kids are.
So I'll just start with that. 10 years?
No, 12.
12 years?
Do your research, mate.
No, I don't want to do that. So 12 years, did you think it was going to take that long? And was your vision of the film 12 years ago different from what we just saw now?
Ooh, that is a good question. No, I didn't think it was going to be 12. This was originally going to be a 25th anniversary release. So I did not think it was going to be 12 years later talking about it, let alone making it. So it did, because we actually, I don't know why, we had to go through like all our old notes and stuff. And the structure was going to be very different. And it was going to be much more kind of compartmentalized, with sort of like focusing on special effects are all going to be in this bit, and actors are all going to be in this bit, and it was going to be more making of doc style, and then just through working on other things and just the natural process was just like, it actually, as you start cutting things together, it's like, actually this seems to be a nice kind of thread the way we've got this, and then we have it kind of follow the film, and which makes it easier to kind of follow and introduce bits and people and parts, so it never kind of feels like it's kind of focusing too much on one thing and getting a bit dull, I suppose, for want of a better expression.
And I think one of the things that became sort of quite organic was, as we were interviewing all kind of 46 people, a lot of the effects team were that, this recurring story of this kind of time constraints that they were working against, the kind of 6 months that they were given to do the post-production. And, it was like this recurring theme, and it was like, hang on, this could be like the kind of this sort of thread that we didn't expect, but can kind of form this kind of the drama and the narrative of the film, really, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was that kind of 1 year, and that's all the time that they've got, and they had 10 months to get the special effects done, and then and that's something we wanted to try and highlight as much as we possibly could. I think there's more to it as well that we just had to cut out, just because we just have to cut things out after a certain amount of time. So there was finding that and wanting to do it. And even when we come on to doing the next doc, that is another aspect to it, is like the special effects and the kind of the pressures that they will put on themselves. So hopefully that will bookend it when that one comes out.
If that one comes out. So let's just go back to the beginning a little bit. You've both had experiences making documentaries and kind of the red carpet scene, the interviewing, things like that. What was it that made you go, oh, let's do Ghostbusters next? Or let's do Ghostbusters at all?
It was just the naivety of going, should we do a Ghostbusters one?
How hard could it be,
that
right?
was it, exactly. It was just like, because we'd worked on the American Werewolf one, and you were doing the red carpet stuff.
Yeah,
but
I was already doing that, yeah.
Started to do, we also have a thing called Premiere Scene, and that didn't come until a couple of years later, I don't think.
No, that's right, yeah.
So it was just that I'd done a lot of camera, Claire had already done the interview stuff, and it was just like, and when, the people we did the American Werewolf thing with, they didn't seem very interested in doing that. And it was just like, well, I really want to do it. I think she could be a laugh. And it'll be harder because everyone's in the States, whereas Werewolf, most people are here. So it was just as simple as like, well, let's give it a go. Yeah. Let's give it a go, and if it works, great. And if it doesn't, we'll send a few invites out, and if we get a nibble, then great. And if we don't get a nibble, then, oh, well, we tried and carry on with life. Well,
and I think we need to acknowledge John Landis without wanting to kind of majorly name drop here, but because he had, but I will. But as he had obviously directed an American Werewolf in London, and he had already got a relationship with Dan Aykroyd, you used an ideal opportunity to say, do you think Dan Aykroyd would be interested in doing a documentary about Ghostbusters? Because, as we knew that Dan Aykroyd had written Ghostbusters in the first place and devised, as you found out yourselves here, it was a case of, well, if we've got Dan Aykroyd, then there's a film here. If he doesn't want to do it, then we really don't. I mean, I know that people will ask about Bill Murray, but Bill Murray was a hired actor. Dan Aykroyd was his brainchild. So you asked Landis.
asked
I will
Mr.
let you tell the story
Well,
because
let me
it
just-
is your story to tell.
if you go to LA and you go to Burbank and you go to Bob's Big Boy, because it's just like there's Bob's Big Boy and there's the Steakhouse, which I think we had.
Yeah.
They're just kind of stable places and everyone kind of goes there. So I asked Mr. Landis, it's like, do you think you could get Dan Aykroyd? Go, oh, sure, I could get you Danny. And I could probably get you Harold and I could probably get you Ivan. And it just, that was like, right, that's all I need to know. And it just kind of went from there. So right, got back to the UK, kind of wrote out a rough idea of what we could do with the doc. And then you go through the IMDb list. And as we know, because there's like 100 people missing basically from the credits, even like Mark Wilson, who we're friends with, and he played Slimer, but he's not in the credits. So, and Ghostbusters 2 is even harder, but in some respects, but because there's even less information about that. But with Ghostbusters, it was just kind of like, well, let's reach out to these people. These are some of like the main ones. These ones, I think I know what that role means because I really didn't have a clue about half the roles within the Ghostbusters. I think that's an important one. I think that's an important one. So just went through. I've got a feeling we sent out about 20 invites, and Ernie was the first one to come back and agree, and he was the first one to be interviewed, and then slowly people start kind of getting on board when you can say, well, we've got this person and that person, and that was kind of it. And we went out to New York first, interviewed John Rothman, David Margulies and Timothy Carhart, and that was the first trip. Then we went out to LA later on in the year and we did like a chunk of others, and slowly it was just, okay, we've got a bit of money, we've done some work, it's cheaper than a holiday, so we tootle off. There used to be a great travel lodge in Santa Monica, which is now no longer a travel lodge or no longer cost effective, but it was just this little
Really
roach
budget,
hole,
yeah.
and it was just like, right, okay, go there, and from that place we ended up going to ILM and things like that. It's just all these like weird things you start remembering now, but it's just like steps. Okay, we got this person, got that, but it's just like once we get Aykroyd, we know we got something, and again, part of the reason why it took 12 years. It took 4 years to get Aykroyd to finally sit down and do that interview. It took us waiting in line up at where's the liquor store down in Soho where he was doing a bottle signing. And
on Compton Street.
So we were doing that, like having to buy a £50 bottle of vodka, which we don't drink. I never will.
40 bottles of vodka on your wall right now, probably.
Hey! Oh, what's happening?
So, all right. So when obviously it has taken as long as it did to make the documentary, and as a result, how do I phrase this? So the story of Ghostbusters can be arguably often told. A lot of people would know, especially fans, would know the bare bones of the genesis and the growth and the success of the film. So when you were planning it, did you try and purposely look for the stories that weren't told, the voices that weren't heard? In this story,
yeah. I mean, that was a big thing about this in some respects, because it was always, well, you're never going to get Bill Murray, so it's like, so what's the point? That was essentially the kind of comments that you get back, and to me, that's exactly the reason why you should, because he's a massive presence in Ghostbusters, but it takes a lot of people to make a film, and that was the long and the short of it is, you want to get as many people as you can, because everyone's got a story, and I'm certainly not a fan of interviewing someone for the sake of it, and then we've got this person now, don't need him anymore, so we'll just leave him off because now we're going to replace him with Simon Pegg, and it's that kind of thing. It's like, which wouldn't have happened, but it was just like everyone is important, and the only reason that some people we interviewed aren't in this one is just because this is the shorter version, whereas the actual version is 2 hours, and that's the one that will get released. But other than that, everyone we interviewed is in the doc. And that was important because everyone does have a story, and the worst part about it is all of them got great stories, and some just, the narrative, they just don't fit, but they'll probably bung them in the special features. But that was always a thing. It's like we're definitely not going to, probably won't get Bill Murray. But for me, that was never like a downside to it. It's always a reason to go, great, well, that's more time we can spend with Richard Edlund or Terry or Mark Wilson or Stuart Ziff or anybody like that, really. So
and to pick up on the whole Bill Murray thing and whatever you might read in the press, he has not refused to be in it. He said he would be in it. I've asked him twice. He said yes. You saw in the end trailers there, that was me speaking to him at the Monuments Men, and he said he'll do it, but you can't lock him down to a date. So he said yes. It just didn't happen, but we still live in hope.
He could be here tonight, to be fair.
He could, yeah. He probably will rock up for one, won't he?
The other thing as well, because of certainly the length of the first version of the documentary you showed me, and then the length of the time it took to make it, a lot of people have passed on. Obviously, Harold Ramis. So there's a time capsule there of his thoughts right towards before his death, that isn't going to be repeated elsewhere. So do you look back on that and then reflect on that and think, oh God, we were lucky to get that while we could?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, without kind of wanting to big up our participation in this whole Ghostbusters kind of world now, but you almost become like this custodian of their story. And so there's this extra responsibility to, if people say to us, were there times where you thought, you would give up on it? And we never did, because everybody gave their time for nothing. They were generous with their time. And the people that have passed away, you want to be able to kind of live up to, the time that they give you, really. So, and I mean, I don't know whether he knew that he was as ill as he was. So did he know that this would be the last time that he spoke at length about Ghostbusters? And therefore, I mean, I go goose pimply even thinking about that we were the people that he bestowed the honour on us,
Yeah, because I've always kind of had the opinion that actually, without Harold Ramis, Ghostbusters may not have been the film. Because anyone who read the original scripts or have known about the original scripts knows it goes over $200 million in the first 5 minutes of the plot. So he was such a humanising factor.
Yeah.
And obviously with his own kind of spiritual and religious beliefs, you can kind of see that through all of his work. And you see that humanity.
Yeah.
And I think you need to capture that part of the story outside of Dan Aykroyd's obvious investment in the supernatural.
Yeah, and I think as well, what happened when we turned up at his offices in Chicago to be interviewed. We knocked on the door, and I mean, we were terrified, weren't we? And so we knocked on this door, and and it's him stood at the door, and he just goes, "It's the Ghostbusters," like this, and we were like, and it just instantly disarmed us. And if you think about the kind of work that he's done, the films he's directed, the people that he's worked with, that says a lot about a person that can instantly disarm you and doesn't feel like he's got to be this, VIP that you're coming to interview. He just put you at ease.
Yeah.
And, he was literally telling his PA, like, oh, put that appointment back. We had about an hour and 45 minutes. That was just the interview. We had all afternoon with him. He just gave us his time. And doesn't that say a lot about a person,
Yeah, it really does. I mean, and you do feel an essence of responsibility. And some people wanted to kind of make this. I mean, there's 7 people from Ghostbusters. Well, actually, 8 now, if you do include Tim, because he did work on it, that have passed away. But it was just like, are you going to make it like a tribute, like a memorial? It's just like, no. I don't think Harold would have appreciated the Doctor to become, Harold Ramis's Ghostbusters sort of like thing. It wasn't what we were trying to do. It kind of completely went against what we were trying to do, which was a film needs a lot of people. We wouldn't have had Ghostbusters if it weren't for Dan Aykroyd. We wouldn't have had the Ghostbusters film if it wasn't for Harold and Ivan and everybody else that got on board and created what you eventually see.
And the other thing as well, I mean, I just probably didn't know any different, but I expected to meet Egon. And he just wasn't. He was, he wasn't stiff. He was just this big. I mean, that big beaming smile. That's not an act. That was him, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Just oozed this warmth and he was just. Oh, it was lovely.
Yeah,
it was a
really
precious
lovely
memory,
fellow.
definitely.
So when you were making the documentary, you obviously had a fair idea of the stories you might hear and the things you might learn. What were the biggest surprises? Where even you were like, oh, I didn't see that coming?
I don't think I was fully aware of what happened with Ernie and all of that, because I remember him telling us about it. I think I might have heard something about it, but I didn't know it to the depth that Ernie went into with us, and I didn't realise the amount of stuff that that Boss Film had to do. That I think I knew that it's like, oh well, there was this 2010 and that's how we did it with 2010 and Ghostbusters together. But I think they're going into an empty warehouse. And it's like, and the stuff and the detail that they would go into in the interviews that would just there wasn't room for. But they were building printers and Sam Longoria actually
going to Kodak.
Oh yeah, but they're designing
this,
film stocks and giving those specifications to Kodak, and then Kodak sends back the film stock that they've designed. It's like I don't even know where to start. Yeah. And it was just all of that they. It's not like these days. Oh, what do we need to do? Well, I need to go and buy a Mac, and I need to download that software, and then we're done. We're done. Yeah. Whereas I was like, no, we need to know how to build that printer, and because that printer's going to do this, and then we need to build this bit of kit, and they would build everything from scratch, and they were building printers at the beginning that they needed to complete the film that they didn't have at the start. So they had to get all this stuff. So I didn't know. You just think somebody does it, but you just didn't. I didn't think it was them for some reason. It was
the innovation, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I think that we found, and you know what? And just again, you know, a lot of these people are geeks and nerdy, but they're so funny. I mean, Terry and Richard Edlund. You know how I didn't, because I was the person doing the interview, so. You know, I can't laugh out loud, but they were hilarious. I mean, there was like one of the funniest interviews that we've had. That and Steve Johnson, he was hilarious too, but for a whole different reason. He was a real character.
Because I think you said to me that Ghostbusters and Ghostbusters 2 are interesting. Is that one is kind of near the beginning of the whole special effects kind of renaissance, and then Ghostbusters 2 is right before CGI comes in.
Yeah.
And you can kind of see both ends of what they were doing with that. And so to focus as much as you did on the special effects side of things kind of does show you just how unique this film was to get made and be as good as it was and still stand up 35 years later.
I mean, you think sort of like where it stands in history now, that where this, you know, when this came out, this was like the be-all and the end-all, Star Wars and Ghostbusters and Gremlins and Goonies and things, and Back to the Future and all these amazing special effects, which actually only really existed for, 10, maybe 15 years at a push.
Probably ended about Who Framed Roger Rabbit when you think about it.
Wow.
And then it became like Twister and all those kind of...
Yeah, I mean, because I was watching that the other day, Who Framed Roger Rabbit. It's a cracking film. But it's just like, do you think... I was like talking to Mom about, do you know how they did this? Well, they had to get a robot to do this, and they got all these kind of puppeteers to carry trays. And whereas now it's CG'd in, no problem. It's not even something they'd probably even bat an eyelid at, where it took them months of planning in Roger Rabbit to do that kind of the bar scene. And it's this, you know, this film, it was like, it's all a part of that kind of the wild. How do we do it? I don't know, but let's figure it out. They all get together and they all get mucked in. And now, like Thane would say, now you don't get that. Now you turn up, how do you do this? And they expect you to know how to do something instantly rather than doing a bit of sort of like playing around. And okay, you've got a month to play around and figure out how you're going to do it. Now it's like, oh, we can do it on the computer. So it was a different era that ended around sort of like certainly once Jurassic Park. Because the story is, which I think is going to be in the second doc, is that ILM had hired a bunch of people in to do Jurassic Park. So they got a load in to do Ghostbusters, 2 Back to the Future 2, and I think Indiana Jones. So they had like a big team there, because the next big thing was going to be Spielberg's Jurassic Park. And then it was like, have you seen the tests? Have you seen all the CG tests that they're doing for the dinosaurs? You want to go and look at that? And they were saying you were going and seeing this test, and you knew that was it. It's like the Grim Reaper of the effects industry, because you saw something that you could not achieve with, you know, latex and models. And you knew, and they said that was it. And then so it took a couple of years to develop it a little bit more, and then we got Jurassic Park, and then the industry changed and everything became digital. So this, and then, you know, Star Wars and Lucas pushing the whole just digital cinematography, of which we wouldn't have been able to do the doc if we were shooting on 35mm or 60mm. We couldn't have had the money for it. Whereas digital changed the industry. So this film kind of sits right there at the kind of almost at the beginning, before Ghostbusters 2, 5 years later, we're basically at the end. So,
and I think picking up from what you said there, it's interesting what we've seen with the people that we've interviewed, the people that transitioned into the visual effects and the CGI, and the ones that didn't. You know, because there's ones, you know, people still are here in the film that are constantly working, and then the ones that aren't really working, but they would like to, but they just didn't evolve, and the industry changed, and they didn't change with it. Yeah, that's what was very interesting to see as well.
Yeah. So when you're telling a story like this, were there stories where you went, we can skip this bit? Because, for instance, I would have thought the Ray Parker Jr. song might have played a bigger part with the whole Huey Lewis and the News thing, and that in itself is an interesting story. But is there some point where you go, I think that story's known now, can we move on? How do you pick and choose what's important to this narrative?
It was, I mean, with the Ray stuff, it wasn't so much, because it's always a plane. You've got to put stuff in there that people know, because they're going to expect to hear it, and you've got to put stuff there that they don't know, and that's, so it's kind of a balance with the Ray stuff. Legally, I didn't know where we'd stand if we were to turn around and go, so Huey Lewis, when was the last time he was around for a cuppa? And in the end, we couldn't license Ghostbusters anyway. So that's why you don't hear Ghostbusters in the film at all, because we're not allowed to. So, but it was just like, we actually had a great interview with Ray Parker Jr., and in the longer version, he is in it. So it's just like, it became an easy edit. Having to bring this down to 90 minutes weren't easy, but it's just like, we can't use Ghostbusters, and we could barely use Cleaning Up the Town. So it was just like easy to remove those two. That's what made the cut kind of easy for this particular version of the film. But it was just like I don't think even at that point in time when we interviewed Ray, I don't think legally you could talk about the thing. So it was just like
situation
it is. So that was it. It was just like he can't talk about it more than likely. What's the point of rubbing them up the wrong way by us going, hey, so when you ripped that song off? It was an easy choice purely because I don't know where we were legally, where we would have stood. So it was just like, there's no point in asking about it. And I actually thought it would be something that people would bring up a lot more, like, why didn't you include like that? But that was purely it. It was just, it's a tricky subject. So it was just like, we won't ask it. And
so what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you guys if you've got any questions, but just one quick little question. Because you are going to go into Ghostbusters 2 and tackle that, from my point of view as a Ghostbusters fan, it's almost more interesting to me, the story of Ghostbusters 2, because of the circumstances around it and how it was put together and so much was lost and changed. Is it exciting for you to go back, or is it also worrying because there just isn't as enough source material as Ghostbusters 1 had?
Not at this point. Maybe in a year. But at this point, the edit, apart from being a bit ILM heavy, there was some absolute nuggets in there. And mainly because it's not an extremely well-known film. There's not, there's a ton of stuff on Ghostbusters, not like there is Star Wars, but there's even less for Ghostbusters 2. So there was so much there that we were being told. Like, they didn't have a script when they went out to shoot for the first time. They literally didn't have anything. They didn't know what they were doing apart from having scene ideas. That was basically it. So it was just like, oh, this is great. So,
because like famously, like the whole scene between Lewis and Slimer, where like I remember reading the comic book adaptation of the thing. Going, where was all this? And then reading the book as well, the one that was basically all the novelizations.
Exactly.
There's so much in there, and I think. Again, I think you'll say it in the documentary, but it feels like if they had a bit more time with that sequel, it would have been a different film.
Yeah, they would have done. Yeah, I mean, everyone sort of like said if they just had like 2 more months or 3 months, 6 more months, or even did it like a different year. If they did it a couple of years later, then they would have had CG within the slime, and they could have pulled off a lot more, kind of like the bathtub monster.
Painting as
the
well.
Vigo painting, the bathtub monster. There was like concept art for that, looked proper freaky. And it's like we couldn't do it in the time frames and all the time it's like if we just had a little bit longer, and that was a big difference between Ghostbusters. There wasn't a point. There was times like there's a story that isn't in the version or even the longer one that I'll put in the deleted scenes. I know John Bruno talks about it. He said it kind of completes the when they talk about, how close to the knuckle they were with actually getting the film made. And it was the last shots were delivered 2 weeks before the film went out.
Yeah.
And it was GT-73 and GT-76 goes to Temple, and it's the Temple explosion. And he went in the next morning. Said all the lights were on, purple haze was blazing out through Boss Film, and he goes in, sees the printer that was printing off that scene, and it's got like a big metal clickety thing, and it had worn down to like a nub, and a big pile of like metal shavings are left on the floor. Finds, I want to say Bruno George, I think was a fellow. It's like empty bottle of Jack Daniels. He's face down on the sofa, and he just looks up and goes, GT-76 and GT-77 is done. Boom, and he went straight back down to sleep again. And I must put it in the deleted scene because John was like, it was weird because we showed it to him and he really laughed and learned stuff that he didn't know. But he was like, oh, you didn't use that bit. I thought, yeah, you're the only one that is going to miss. But it was those weird things about editing. But so there's so much there I'd love to like put in. But it was called, all comes down to editing. And if you lose the pace, then that's that.
But the other thing as well is that with Ghostbusters 2, there's a lot more behind the scenes. Like William Forsh was kind of like the unofficial videographer, and he would film a lot of the behind the scenes stuff, which we've got. So that's why I think it will be an easier documentary for us, because there isn't so much behind the scenes. So you a lot, the last sort of 2 to 3 years has been Derek doing the motion graphics and animating images and bringing them to life, which is what's part of the reason why it's taken such a long time after the Kickstarter to get finished, because he's hand animated, easy for me to say, whereas I think with Ghostbusters 2 we have much more kind of archive material and behind the scenes to play with.
We've got some great artwork.
Yes, we have.
The same thing with, because you want the same thing, but same thread. But half the problem, like putting in animation in here, is because we've got nothing we can put in. So Derek says, "Oh, animation!" It's like, great. I was thinking about doing animation. What are we going to do? But it was that's it, because it was me and Derek basically doing the edit and him essentially doing the graphic. I did a couple of bits. I wish I'll point out another time. But
I'm thinking about the poor person that's got to edit this afterwards and the inconsistent
I
sound.
know how easy it actually is. Anyway, but but basically it was that's it. It's like you interviewed someone recently about the Michael Hutchins documentary, and that's mainly just archive material.
Yeah, it
so
is.
They had 5 editors plus interns working on that and got it out probably about a year turn.
Yeah, that's right.
And there's just like me and Derek, and some of that stuff, some of those graphics can take like a couple of hours to do because they're relatively straightforward, and some of them take a couple of weeks to do because they're actually quite complicated, and I don't even know how he's done some of the stuff. And that's, it's great when you've got a team of 5 people editing, another 5 or 6 people doing motion graphics, and you haven't got that, then you just kind of and doing a day job in between. It's that's time consuming.
It's just a whiteboard of pens and you writing. All right, do we have any questions for Anthony and Claire? Yes, I know you would. I'll go for it, Sam.
So I know
Wait a second.
Oh,
there we go. I know when you initially started off, it was going to be Ghostbusters 1 and Ghostbusters 2 as one documentary.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to know, how easy was the decision to make to split it into 2? Was it did it seem daunting, or was it just because you had so much material it was an easy choice?
Yeah, probably that more than anything else. It was, we knew, I think it was like 4 hours or something like that. And it's always that kind of, this is just going to be on a DVD, like Blade Runner, and that was always like the way that I try and sell the Blade Runner. I had a fantastic documentary, and it's 4 hours long, but it's just like, but do you think I'm not trying to make a commercial doc, but we're trying to tick 2 boxes, make a commercial documentary, but also have something that the fans and I want to see. And so several times we kicked around the idea, I think, over the course of time. And it's just like, okay, we'll see how the edit goes, and then. But by the time you've gone through several passes of the edit and refined it down, and that refined version of just this film was 3 hours, it's like, right, okay, if we do that with Ghostbusters 2, it means we've got to cut down one or the other, and something's got to give, and you've got to sacrifice something, and I don't want to do that, because you don't mind doing those sacrifices when the story still flows, but if you're making those, and I've seen docs that the story doesn't flow as well, it kind of chops about a bit. It's like if they'd have made that documentary 15 minutes longer, it would have flowed, and it'd be actually a lot more entertaining. And I wasn't really prepared to make that kind of sacrifice with this. It was very much, we know what we want to do, and we aren't going to sacrifice the second film for the sake of the first, and vice versa. So it was just like, the hardest part was coming up with a name. It was like, it's Cleanin Up the Town Part 2. Oh, that's it. That I am quite proud of. And then through a lot of kicking around, it was like we came up with the idea of Too Hot to Handle. It was going to be Too Hot to Handle, to Remembering Ghostbusters 2. And then at some point it would whittle down to just Too Hot to Handle, Remembering Ghostbusters 2. And then it just became a massive relief. It's like, right, we've got all that time to spend on Ghostbusters now, and I'd still need to edit it down. I still need to make it flow, but at least I know something isn't getting sacrificed. That a story that's going to get a laugh is going to hit the cutting room floor type of thing. So, and this was, making a screener version was hard enough. To just taking out like 20, 30 minutes out of it, that was not easy. But anyway.
Any more questions? Oh, no, we don't. Oh, we have.
Oh, quickie.
Let's do one quickie. Go on.
It's a very short question. I'm absolutely fascinated by the clearances. Did you have a legal team, or did you deal with Columbia? How did they feel about all this? Did they put any restrictions on it? Do you have to deal with Columbia in detail? Who actually owns the material, and how did you clear it, or have you not cleared it?
We definitely cleared it.
We
definitely cleared it. Yeah.
I
know. Basically, we went fair use. And so we hired an attorney out in the States that specialised in fair use, and that was the way that we went. Basically, that's the short version of the story. So it is all legal and above board. Say that very, very carefully. But yeah, that was the way that we and Sony, in fairness, have been sort of very supportive.
They don't expect any money or from profits or anything like that, or other
I'm sure they might expect, but expecting and actually receiving are 2 different things. It was, because the fair use thing, how it works is that it's like we would have liked to have gone through Sony, and we at one point were talking with them, but we couldn't come to an agreement, and we were walking a very delicate line, because if a license holder denies you the license, there's nothing you can do about it. Even fair use, you can't get around that. So we were thankfully in this situation where because we'd spoken to them about the documentary, we hadn't gone to them to license anything. I understand. I've got a feeling some of them there aren't very happy, but we have gone through everything legally. We would not be able to show the film at all if it hadn't gone that route. And fair use has enabled us to do that, which is why the film took like the past year was really doing that, getting the legal clearances, recutting it in some places to make sure we were completely like above board and stuff. So, I mean, so there's some people there, not necessarily Sony, but the Ghost Corps people like it and they've seen it. Ivan actually watched it recently because he had to do an interview. So they all seem to be liking it, which is fantastic. Just I didn't like enough to pay enough money for it. It was basically it. And we couldn't. And if we were in a financially robust situation, it probably wouldn't have been a problem. But we're not, and we couldn't commit financial suicide. Basically, it was even before the Kickstarter. We'd put a lot of money into this, and I think there is some people that think that they're like, oh, the Kickstarter. Well, the whole thing was funded by Kickstarter, and it wasn't. It's really helped a lot. And it got us over the final one of the final hurdles. There's a few of them, as it turns out now. But we already put in like at least 2 or 3 times the amount that we earned on Kickstarter out of our own personal money. So to kind of go this route is really just to try and keep the bank manager happy, really. Afford a holiday again.
All right, then, with that being said, just one quick round of applause, just once again, to thank them for all the hard work they've done to put this documentary together.
Claire
and Anthony Bueno.
Thank you very much.
And if you like the documentary, spread the word. And it's available soon, is it?
Soon, VOD end of the month, and then physical release beginning of May.
Right, start clapping again now and then go.
Thank you.